Simon Allaloo from Balliol. You said that the more attachments and connections we have, the healthier and happier we are. If I quote a very specific example, but one that's quite common, for example, a wife who's in a very unhappy marriage, drunken husband, violence, that sort of thing. Are you saying that she would be better off to stay in that relationship or to break it off and break off the connection?
It may sound a little bit radical and maybe overstated, but I would venture to say that 85% of couples who consider getting divorced, who talk about getting divorced, who are on the verge of getting divorced, would be better off staying together. 85%. It used to be that divorce was a very rare occurrence. It still is very rare. It just happens more often. It is very rare that a relationship, that a marriage needs to be dissolved. That they would be better off dissolving it. Very rare. So many people are getting divorced who don't have to. And even those who do get divorced will eventually tell you, and I hear this all the time, looking back at it, with a little adjustment it could have worked. Because the person who looks back at a divorce and says that was a disaster, I don't know how I ever got myself into that ridiculous relationship, remains traumatized by that divorce and is incapable of remarrying. It's an interesting thing. They are ready to remarry when they can look back at the first marriage and say, could have worked. Too late now, but it could have worked. Then the trauma is gone. They're no longer intimidated by the disaster of the first marriage. Now they're ready to try it again. So to remarry, you really almost have to be able to see the first one working with a little adjustment. And the same is true with our parents. The person who says, I'm not going to get married. I know what marriages are. I've seen my parents. It was a disaster. I'm going to be very careful. I will not marry someone like my mother. Or I will not marry someone like my father. That's a disaster. You will, I promise you. And you should. Because if you're going to get married at all, you have to be able to see how your parents could have made it work. If you really think they never should have been married, then you never should have been born. Then how can you go ahead and get married yourself? Even if you marry somebody different. You get married because marriage is a healthy tradition, which means that your parents had a marriage that produced you, and that was healthy, and that you will produce someone like yourself. And if that's too terrible to think of, then you're not ready to get married either or have children. You have to be able to see how that marriage could have worked with just a little adjustment, not a lobotomy,